Dear learners, welcome to live teleconferencing session. In this session, we will discuss about understanding policy in context of theories of state. This topic coming under that it is one of the core course of BA Public Administration Honors. The course code is BPSC 106. Today, we are going to see the interrelationship between public policies and various theories of state. In general, we can say the state refers to the governing entity or a political organization that exercising authority and control over different territory or and its population. For example, to take any country, or like you can take the country of India, you know how their policy making, how the ideologies, whether it is a right-wing ideology, whether it's a left-wing ideology, whether it's a socialist, whether it is authoritarian, whether it is a non-authoritarian, whether whether it is a liberal government, whether it is a neoliberal government, whether it is a corporate-oriented government, that various ideologies are there. So, how these ideologies are impacting the theories of state, and how how the different theories and perspective exist, and how it affects the nature and role and functions of the state. So, in this session, we briefly discuss about the different theories of state, how they are influencing the formulation, implementation, and evaluation of the public policies. Like for example, if you take any country, public policies is a prime function of the state. The success and failure depends upon the successful or implementation of the public policy. The government, whether it is doing good or bad, depends upon the public policy only. So, totally what to do or what not to do. So, these function totally depends upon the public policy only. So, in that way, public policies plays a prime functions of the state. Like for example, most of the time that policies depends on the polity oriented. So in that you can say that how does the state make policy that work for the welfare of the people. So everyone should understand how does the state make policies that work for the welfare of the people, and how these policies can be better by the state, and those big questions that to be addressed. Like for example, in the first questions, how does the state make policies that work for the welfare of the people? So that's what we have a various institution, parliamentary, political executives are there, permanent executives are there, and we have a parliament, and in that likewise we used to make a policy to the welfare of the people. And another question is how these policies can be made better by the state. Okay, how these can be made be better by the state. That these are the questions mostly addressed by the public policy also. And you can say that another way they are arguing that public policy would be better if different people exercise more influence on policy process. Like that public policy is a very complex process in nature. You can't work with only with the elected representative or permanent representative like bureaucrats or not. You need various support from the pressure group, politicians, pressure group, civil servants, academic and professional experts, journalists and judiciary, and even sometimes you can see themselves as a passive recipients of policy. Like for example, common citizen. That's what nowadays you can see that popular form of participative decision making and all. So when you understand the policy process in the context of the state, you should have a good understanding of policy, and you should know about the various theories of the state also. Like for example, if you look into the public policy of India, we are totally made upon the socialist perspective, economic and socialist and government oriented, like state dependent on that. But if you look into the United States of America and United Kingdom, they mostly depends upon the corporate market oriented system. So you can see that how those policies are making. So in that first thing, before going into the topic, we will see about the meaning of public policy. meaning of public policy in the sense it gives a different meaning in the different context, okay, and it used to provide a various actor, as I already mentioned, that legislative, executive, judiciary, NGOs, media persons and common people. So we need a total, we need a collective responsibility to get the achievement of the public policy. So sometimes what happen, policy can be written or unwritten, but it is the state force behind the state's process to achieve the desired goals. Like for example, written and unwritten. Written in the sense we already written in our constitution what to do and what not to do, and sometimes we are in the we used to enact act through the parliament. And if in unwritten means it's a socio-cultural ethical norm, so we used to follow by tradition. These are the things used to be followed by these are the things we can say it's a unwritten only. The Chambers Dictionary, that they defined policy as a course of action. Okay, course of action, it's like a declared and respected principles. It's a kind of a course of action. It is a declared and respected principle. If you look into the definitions, it's like a policy is a more than a decision. Decision is a micro component, but if it is a policy, is a micro perspective. Unfortunately, if you see, the policy itself is something which takes different forms. Like for example, the designate policy as the outputs of the political system, and in a lesser degree to define policy as a more or less interdependent policies dealing with many perspectives. In the same way, Drawer, he said that one of the Drawer is one of the foremost advocates of public policy discipline. He said that the development of policy science has defined policy as the general directives on the main lines of action to be followed. As per Drawer, public policy means general directives on the main lines of action to be followed. It's a general directive. Like for example, as you take, if you in India, we can take it about the new educational policy. They have provided the general directive to the country. So after that, the rest of the institution make happen to the implement, and they used to be do it in each and every state, or we can use to follow that also. The likewise you can say that national health policy, national agriculture policy, national telecom policy, national IT policy. So there are various policies are there. So mainly as per view, Drawer, public policy is a general directive which is followed by the courses of action only. In the same way, Thomas Dye in 1978, he is also one of the foremost runner in discipline of public administration. He said that public policy is whatever governments choose to do or not to do. That's it. In a simple way, public policy is whether the government, whatever the government choose to do or not to do. You can say that government decision also. So this is in a very simple meaning. The same way B.M. Smith, he in 1976, he said that the concept of a public policy denotes deliberate choice of action or inaction rather than the interrelating forces and all. So if you look into the above definition taken as a whole, we can say that policy is a purposive course of action taken or adopted by those in power pursuit of certain goals and objectives. So it should be added here that some of the public policies are adopted, but most of the policies are sometimes what used to happen, it's implemented by the government official and the private sector. Ultimately, public policy means about the people, their values and needs. So even if the private organ or something they are involving also, but if you look into that public policy means it's about the people, values and the needs. So next one is that public policy in a context of the state. So how we are looking into the public policy in a context of state, like context of the state, like for example in India is a democratic country. If you look into that other parts of country, there's some country are ruled by the military ruler. Some country they used to do by the king, and like if you go to the western country, mostly they are dominated by the corporate people. And if you go to into the African region, mostly they have ruled by the that military, or we can say so it used to vary from state to state. So how this kind of a how this kind of a pattern is impacting upon the public policy. That is more important. Like when we talk about the public policy in context of the state, there are two dimensions to be involved. That is politics involving conflict, power, and ideology. So, and another one is that administration involving analysis, organization, and methods. Like for example, politics means politics involving conflict, how they are get the power, and how their power and how they are towards the people and their ideology used to affect the context of the state. And the same way, and administration mostly in the implementation part. Public policy making, not only public policy making is the important one, after that you have to implement properly. Once you have implemented, you have to make a proper monitoring system. Once you have done the monitoring, you have to give the feedback system to the, again, as a feedback system as a input. So both the things, politics and administration, is have to work interrelated, and they have to play each other only. So in that case, how these politics and administration is to be different. Like for example, it must be recognized that power flows from the state. Like for example, you can say it's a government in action. When applied to the acts of government in backing their policy decisions, while the effective use of sanction, it commonly referred as the state power. Power conveys a notion of a capacity, to inflict penalty, that kind of a coercion of a kind usually reserved by the state itself. On the other hand, we can say sometimes the influence, that influence conveys the notion of inducement and persuasion. So, the state has a legitimacy of the power in public policy making. So, it takes kind of a difficulties. One thing about the nature of the state, and another one is that role of the state, how they are providing of the policies. So one thing we can say that nature of the state, another one is the how they are provided those public policy in the state also. Like one of the foremost thinker in that one public in that state, or you can say bureaucrat perspective, Max Weber, in 1947, he defined state as the administrative legal order subject to change by legislation. Okay, state means it's administrative and legal order subject to change by the legislation, and claiming binding authority and overall action taking place in the area of jurisdiction. It can be identified by the both, like for example, you can say that it can be identified in terms of both the institution that make it up and the functions these institutions perform. Like state institution include legislative body, executive body, including government bureaucracy, departments body, and judicial body, with responsibility for enforcing through the decisions and developing the law. So state institutions are located at various levels of national, regional, and the local level and all. Here the state, in the sense, like for example, state in some, it represents the country. It not particular represent any particular Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, or also. As per totally state, in the sense, it is a kind of a nation. It represents the nations. So far we have seen about the meaning of public policy and the context of public policy. Now we are going to see about the pluralist theory of state and policy. So pluralist, the phrase itself, particular perspective or theory, it says that how democracy should work. Pluralism in the context like acceptance and recognition of diverse and multiple groups interaction within the society. In a pluralist society, various groups, organizations, and individuals have the freedom to express the views and participate in the political process. Like for example, pluralism in the sense, like for example, taken in the context of India, we have more length and breadth. We have many states and we have many cultural groups, and we have a mountain state. And if you go, it varies from, we are different from the geographically, culturally, and so when we are making a public policy, that there are various groups used to be participate. That's what in a pluralist democracy, various groups, organization, and individuals have the freedom to express their values and views and participate in the political process. And another thing one is that when it is the pluralist theory, power is widely distributed. Okay, like for example, power is not concentrated in a single authority or a small group of people. Instead, it is spread out to the distributed among different groups and actors in society. Like for example, in India, we have a three kind of a system. One is the national, state, and the local level. So it is a center used to provide the guidelines. State and local level, they used to implement it only, and state have some kind of a power also, and local level also 73rd 74th amendment has been given the some kind of a power also. So in pluralist democracy, power is not concentrated on the single hand. Instead, it's spread out and distributed among different groups and actors in society. So the distribution of power is often as the key feature, and it's a healthy democracy system because it prevents the dominance of any one in the group. So it, instead of dominating one group, it is a various group. It's like a kind of a participatory decision making. In the political system, the political system is here in the pluralist democracy. It is structured and designed as a crucial role. It implies that the organization of the political system is important for the pluralist democracy also. So likewise, policy is essentially driven by the public demands and opinions. In a pluralist theory, mostly public policies taken by the public demands and opinion. Like in the student of public administration, as you all know that how the public policy is started. First point is that first important thing is that you should need a course. There is a need should be there. Based on the need only, you can create a new policy. Like for example, why we have to create a new education policy? Already we have a policy, but you know that it's a changing time. There kind of a needs are arriving. That's what in the pluralist democracy they are saying that public policy mostly made by the public demands and the opinions, and also in the policies and decisions are primarily influenced by the public and what they want and think. So the government and the political leaders are expected to take into the demands and opinions of the diverse groups and individuals within a society while formulating policies and making decisions and all. And another one is that elite mass theory of state and policy. So the topic itself, the title itself, it shows that elite mass theory of state and policy. You can say that how the elitist group used to influence the public policy, influence the state. You can say that much of the current literature on political power adopts the elite mass theory perspective. This model suggests that power is concentrated upon the few elites only. Unlike pluralist, it has been spread out to the throughout the people. But in the elite model, it is concentrated on the one of the few of the elites only. So policy making according to the elite mass theory, it is a process which works to the advantages of the elites. So this theory argues that the society, there are those at the top with the power and the bottom people without power. You can say that two set structure is there. One is that with people and another one is the without power. In the with power is the top of the people that you can consider as a elite, and the bottom that without power, that is the common people. And also this theory holds that the elite whose members share common values and they have a more money, they have education, public governs the masses, and who are apathetic and ill-informed about the public policy. So in an environment which is characterized by the apathy and information distortions and elites influence, mass opinion on public policy issues. So most of the time what happened, the policy flows downward from the elite to the masses. So one way it is like a kind of we can say that the power is focused upon the few of the people only. So like for example, you can say that some kind of an important proposition in the elite mass theory, that is that one is that people with the power and people with the power and the without power. With power is the elite group and without power is the bottom of the people. They are not doesn't have a power, and the elite members are disproportionately from the higher income socioeconomic data of the country, or you can say society. If you look into the basis of elite, they have a common values of social system, and they are the sanctionality of private property, and And another thing is that in that situation, public policy do not reflect what the masses demand, but rather to preferences of the values of the governing elite. Okay, in the elite mass theory, that it won't represent the governed people, governed class, that is our masses, but it mostly depends on the preference of the governing elite only. Here elite shape opinion on policy issues more than also, and you can say that sometime you can recognize the elite mass conflict also. So, and in that continuum, next we are going to see about the Marxist perspective of state and policy. Karl Marx sought to show how power is exercised in a capitalist society in a ways beneath the surface levels of political institutions. For example, Marx, who are socially politically strong, ignore the desires of the politically weak and they exploit them. His theory is that people who are socially and politically strong ignore the desires of the politically weak and exploit the also. So Marx have accept the picture of a class domination in a society is overlasting. So in the view of Marx, state is an instrument of the class power. This so-called instrumentalist approach has focused on the surface levels of decision policy making. So Karl Marx, what he said is how power is exercised in a capitalist society in the surface levels of the political institution also. As per Marx, who are socially politically strong, what they used to do is that they used to ignore the desires of the politically weak and they used to exploit them also. This is what mostly Karl Marx used to say. And another thing is that Marx used to say that state is the instrument of the class power. He never accepted that state is the that it is a part of the common people. He always used to say state as a instrument of class power. Those who are that instrumental approach is that you can say that instrumental in the sense how they are accessing power. Okay, that way Karl Marx approaches that. He also one way that elite people used to determine the public policy and all. And another thing is that globalist theory and national policy agenda. So what do you mean by globalist theory and national policy agenda? Globalist theory is it's a massive scale and in the process, and it is contributed by the contemporary policy making. As I already mentioned that countries, most of the political system, that no longer impermeable to the outside pressures and influences. Now the world has become a single social system as a result of growing interdependence. The point is that there is a new kind of interplay between transnational companies and national and the world economics. Like for example, you can relay that after the globalization, how the outlook of India has been changed. Earlier, the state used to dominate over the entire thing. Now, how the private sector playing, and most of the time, like for example, how the disinvestment and the liberalization policy involved various countries. Like another thing, also you can say that how this due to COVID, how it has affected entire world. So now we can't say that only one, like countries interdependent countries dependency, or you can say that country used to work alone. It's not at all possible. So now there what happened that interdependency has been increased, because interdependency in the sense, like for example, due to globalization, there is a new term has been emerged, that is globalism has gained more attention and the recognition. So globalism refers to all the process which the people of the world incorporated in a single world society, in a globalized society. Or you can say that globalism is one of the forces which assist the development of the globalization. Globalism is one of the forces, that it assists the development of globalization. So the implication of the notion of problem definition defined in the global context only. In a global environment, it is possible to speak of the convergence of concerns for with global strategies may followed, and you can say that now this globalism is new agenda is now becoming a part of our global government also. Like for example, earlier, like before 1990s, our policy used to be entirely different: health, education, and or you can say that national water, land. But now, if you look into that, our policies are mostly for regarding the environmental depopulation. Mostly depends upon the poverty and population growth, and HIV, AIDS and pandemics, drugs and health issues, trade and industries, privatization, terrorism and other globalism. So now we are moving into the new kind of issues. That is that globalism. After the globalism, our policy also changing towards environmental and new health issues. It's totally focused upon the throughout the world. And finally, you can say that developing as well as the developed countries, policy agendas are mostly, it used to be determined by the global forces only. You can say that International Monetary Fund and WTO. You used to hear that due to the impact of WTO, due to the impact of IMF, and due to the impact of the World Bank. So nowadays, the most of the policy agendas are driven by the global forces due to the globalization. So sometimes problem arise in context, some economic and social conditions also play a shaping opinions and political strategies. For example, you can say that how the slow growth, stagnation and all worse also. We used to get output index report also. But since the 1990s, the countries around the world have actively engaged in the privatizing the public enterprises also due to the globalization. And towards the end, so far we have seen about the meaning of public policy, context of public policy, and pluralist view of public policy, elite Marx theory of public policy, Karl Marx theory of public policy, and how the global agenda has been changed into the public policy. So these are the things used to be, that how it affect the state working style, or the policy formulation and implementation methods and all. So here there is a need to look at the challenges posed by the theoretical discourse. So these used to be support distribution of power and enhance the power of specific interest also. If you look into the theoretical framework, it used to provide the different set of issues for the state, and you have to be taken place within the structures and influenced by those structure. But in actual practice, what happens is a complex situation. So based on the state, based on the theories, we can define the nature of the state, or we can say that working pattern of the state, or you can say that implementation pattern, or you can say the agenda of the state. So we can define in a various way. So thank you for listening. Thank you.
We wear clothes on a daily basis. But have we ever wondered, where do our clothes come from? Who makes our clothing? And who are the people and the process responsible for the whole manufacturing of our clothing? If you want to know more about this, Indira Gandhi National Open University from the School of Continuing Education has launched a program which is Certificate in Apparel Merchandising. There are many benefits after doing this program. You can become a designer in various fields. It can be fashion designer, apparel designer, costume designer, or even a textile designer. One can also work as a fashion consultant. Research and development is another field which one can take up after doing this certificate course. Going into academics is another perk after doing this program. Getting into fashion houses or fashion studios as an intern is also a very good option post doing the certificate in apparel merchandising. The basic eligibility of the program is 10 plus 2. The duration of the program is 6 months to 2 years. The program is also available for both the admission cycles, which is July and January. The exams are conducted twice a year, in June and December. So what are you waiting for? Join this program and get an enriching knowledge in the field of apparel merchandising. And to do so, you can log on to the official website of the university, www.ignou.ac.in.
A warm welcome to Ignou. If you are creative, if you can write well, and if you can visualize, mass communication is the correct career option for you. I am going to talk about postgraduate diploma in journalism and mass communication, which is also the first year of MA program in journalism and mass communication. So any learner who has done a postgraduate diploma in journalism and mass communication is eligible to take admission straight away into the second year of our master's program in journalism and mass communication. Duration to complete this program is minimum 1 year, and because we have this inherent flexibility in distance education system, you can take up to 3 years to complete this program. The minimum eligibility criteria for taking admission in this program is bachelor's in any discipline. To give you a glimpse of what are the various components of this program, we begin with telling you what mass communication is, what are the various areas, various branches of mass communication. Then we go on to tell you about the various reporting techniques and beats of reporting, followed by media ethics, the principles, the codes of conduct that you must follow, and we also focus on the writing skills and editing skills for print media. Now this program comprises of 8 courses of 4 credits each. 25% of the entire program is practical based. So we have 6 theory courses and 2 practical courses. This program is so designed so that it will be able to make you more employable in the market. So it helps you build a career in print media, in radio, television, new media, as well as the allied subjects of mass communication, which could be media marketing, advertising, public relations and corporate communications, event management. This can also help you become an entrepreneur in areas like photography or having your own production house and so on. So I hope that you will be excited to join this program, and we will be waiting to welcome you here in Ignou.
We welcome you to join the bouquet of programs offered by the School of Humanities, the Indira Gandhi National Open University, New Delhi. The Indira Gandhi National Open University, New Delhi is a mega university today. It was created by an Act of Parliament in 1985. It is the world's largest university with an enrollment of about 3.5 million current students and 3.2 million alumni. Ignou has also been accorded the highest grade of academic excellence, A++, by the National Assessment and Accreditation Council, or the NAC. Now, during your time at Ignou as a learner, we will help you complete your program of study with world-class printed materials, audio and video programs. We have more than 35,000 academic counselors who will guide you till you complete your program of study. We also provide live interaction with your teachers at the headquarters via teleconferencing mode and live interactive radio counseling besides this, supported by regular TV and radio broadcasts. The School of Humanities was created in 1988, and we welcome you warmly to join any of our programs of study. Ignou degrees, diplomas and certificates are recognized not only in the country but are also very well received across the globe. We look forward to your journey with us, and we welcome you once again.
Very good afternoon, dear learners. Today we are here to discuss on one of a very important back course titled as Media and Communication Studies. I am Dr. Vibhuti Gaud from School of Humanities coordinating this particular course. Dear learners, we all know that communication is a significant part of human life. It is not just about communicating your ideas, opinions, viewpoints, but it is rather much more. Communication is everywhere. In fact, one can say that communication is life. It is organic. Communication is involved in the throbbing of the heart. You can even hear communication in the Chandrayaan mission that's gone in the sky. So communication is very, very significant aspect, and we need to know it from multi angles. Communication, in this particular session, we are going to focus on few particular things. The main objectives of this particular lectures would include defining what is communication, what are its meaning, explaining the importance of communication, defining the communication process, identifying the essential elements of communication and the role that each of these elements play in the communication process, and discuss the 7 important C's of communication. Alongside, we would also go into what essentially mass media essentially consists of, and could there be any negative impact of this mass media communication. So to begin with, what is communication? Communication is a process that allows an individual to exchange information in several ways, such as communicating one's own perceptions, point of views, or experiences which are gained in the process of living. Communication, while one does it, it involves a lot of verbal and non-verbal elements. Verbal elements would include oral as well as written scripts, and non-verbal would include your body language, your sign language, the para-language, and various other aspects. In order to make communication a successful process, both the sides, the sender as well as the receiver, need to understand the fine subtleties of this communication process. The verbal elements and the non-verbal elements should be understood by the receiver, which has been sent by the sender. Communication happens at various levels. It happens in many different ways for most of the human beings, as well as in different kinds of machines as well. So in communication, there are different kind of elements that are involved, and it is time to focus on what are these different elements that essentially mean what communication is. To begin with, communication, it involves the sender. The sender is sending a particular form of content which is called as a message. The sender should be sensitive about what should be the content of the message. Content should be in sync with whether the audience or the listeners or any form of recipients, they would be in a position to understand that particular message. Apart from this message, the third important element which is involved in it is the receiver. The receiver also should be very alert in receiving the message. The receiver should pay attention to the finer details of the message. Along with it, what is also of very, very important aspect of this particular this element of communication is the feedback. If the feedback is not attended to, the communication process might be paralyzed. So these are the few important elements which are there in the communication process. Now it is time to talk about what are the functions of communication, what essentially communication leads to. The foremost is the information. Information as a concept, it bears a diversity of meaning. We all know, everyday usage, we give a lot of information to each other. There are the technical settings, which require so much of information, which give out so much of information. But generally speaking, information would mean imparting instructions, knowledge, meaning, mental stimulus, patterns, perceptions, and representation. The second important function of communication is persuasion. Persuasion, we all know, is a form of a social influence. Persuasion is a process of guiding people towards the adoption of an idea, attitude, or action by rational or symbolic means, though it might not be logical always. The third important function of communication is while we debate and we discuss things, it is a formal method of interactive argument. Debate is a form of argument, since it involves persuasion also. It's a broader form of argument rather, since it involves persuasion, which appeals to the emotional responses of an audience, which enable people to discuss and decide on differences within a framework defining how they will interact. Other important aspect of or function of communication rather is instruction. Instruction is a form of communicated information that is both command and explanation for how an action, a behavior, or a method or a task is to begin, how it needs to be completed, how it needs to be conducted or executed. The other function of communications are entertainment. Now, entertainment, we all know, is an activity which is designed to give us pleasure, to give us relaxation, and we can have multiple ways in which entertainment comes to us in form of TV, radio, etc. Also, very important function of communication is cultural promotion. Communication is a major source for cultural preservation and promotion. It helps individuals to pursue and satisfy the creative urge. The other important function of communication is integration. Communication is a great source of disseminating knowledge and information, which further helps in social integration. The more we communicate, the more integrated we become. And this particular aspect is very important, especially in a country like India, where we have a lot of diversity and also an urge to integrate with each other. So communication thus becomes a medium of not just an exchange of ideas, dry facts, but it brings us together, brings us into a comprehensive whole, develops our identity, a social identity, a national identity, brings us closer. So communication becomes a life thread of a particular nation. To go ahead with this particular idea, now we can focus more on different elements of communication. We've focused on this in little brief. We've spoken about the message, which is very important, the communicator, which is the source of communication, which begins the communication process by transmitting information to the receiver. Then also there is the transmission medium, which we spoke about, and this is a kind of a pathway by which the message flows. It is a vehicle, this transmission medium, that carries the message from the sender to the receiver and then back. Now, further to it, we also just discussed about the receiver here, and the important thing that needs to be taken in account when it comes to decoding the message which has been encoded by the sender. So one has to be very skillful in decoding this particular message, and it involves a lot of skills on part of the receiver to decode the particular message. And yes, feedback again is very important. Perhaps, the greater cause of ineffective communication is failure of the sender to request feedback from the receiver. So if one wants to make a communication a very successful process, a process that gives benefit, a process that can produce the expected results, then all these elements of communication that we've just spoken about needs to be activated in the right form. Then only the functions that we've just discussed, they will be kind of executed, implemented, or completed in a way that is expected from a process such as communication. So the elements of communication needs to be in the right tone and tenor. They need to be in complete sync with each other so that the functions of communication can be performed at a way in which it is expected, and the entire communication cycle is it's completed and it's done, it's executed and implemented as expected, and the desired results are obtained. Further, now we can talk about the different kinds of communication which are happening. Of course, the first person that we all communicate every day, every moment is ourselves. So, is our own self. So, interpersonal communication is something that all of us do. We have a dialogue with ourselves. So, this is something that we keep doing within ourselves. Now, second important part of communication, important kind of communication rather, is interpersonal communication. Now, interpersonal communication, it is defined by communication scholars in various different ways, but most of these definitions which talk about this particular concept, it involves participants who, or two or more participants who are in a close vicinity, and they are interdependent on one way or the other, and they have a shared history. Sometimes they might even not have a shared history, as in they are sharing a particular social space. So that could be one kind of interpersonal communication. And interpersonal communication can have different kind of settings for that matter. Other kind of communication is a group communication. Group communication, as it's itself self-explanatory, it examines in the most effective ways of communicating and interacting with social and work groups. it provides an opportunity for direct interaction among the members of the group, which helps in bringing about change in attitude, in beliefs, and offers a very clear understanding. So group communication develops the overall personality. It kind of develops a kind of an ambience. The other different kind of communication, apart from interpersonal, intrapersonal, then group communication, is the mass communication. These days we've heard about it so much. Now, what is mass communication? Mass communication is a term. To define it in very general terms, it is used to describe the various means by which individuals and entities they relay information to large segments of the population, all at once through the mass media. Now, this is the mass communication. We've all heard of this phrase quite a lot, and we are going to discuss in very briefly about what essentially this mass communication would be in the slightly later. But before that, it is important to know what are these 7 C's of communication. Now, to begin with, the first of these 7 C's of communication is the content. Content, it is the best measure of how effective your communication can be. And all of us want that audience should walk away after listening to some content, and the content which they can relish, they can remember. So the very foremost, one should be very, very careful and honest about the content that one intends to deliver through the communication process. The other important C is the context. Now, there could be multiple contexts in which one communicates, but those particular contexts should be very clear, and they should not contradict the message. Now, whatever context it is, it should provide for more participation, and it should be helpful in making a clear goal, before one begins to design how one's communication would go on. So one should have multiple questions. One should ask multiple questions to oneself before beginning the process, as in what exactly is the context where one has to deliver, and so accordingly what content it should contain, so that the communication is understood and comprehensible by the listeners or the audience. The other important C in this, in order to make communication effective, are the channels. Only the established channels they should be used in communication. The channels that the receiver can understand and also uses and respects. So creating new ones all of a sudden is difficult. It becomes difficult. And different channels, they have different effects, we all know, and but they would serve effectively in different stages by understanding the sensitivity of that particular context in this particular diffusion of information. The other important C, which is very important as far as the communication process is concerned, is the clarity. One should be very clear about what essentially one is trying to deliver. So therefore, this is one of the hardest part of the process, and most often it is neglected. And therefore, we expect people to edit their viewpoints and then present the information. So one should have a lot of clarity when the communication process one tends to deliver. The other important aspect is the composition. Whatever ideas you have, how do you compose, how do you build up the story, what are the essential elements that you're putting in that story so that it becomes interesting. So composition also becomes one of the very important one of the 7 important C's of communication. The other important C of communication is the contrast. If one builds up a particular composition in a form of an argument or in a form of a dialectic, the entire way in which it is coming out would be definitely very impressive and would leave some mark on the audience. Other important C, which is important, is that when we are highlighting this entire differences and everything, one should also keep in mind that these differences and different kind of arguments, they should not distract from the main idea which is there. So building up the entire composition with a lot of varieties, using a lot of writing skills, a lot of speaking skills into it, but at the same time, one should keep in mind the very idea which is behind that particular communication exercise should be retained, and that particular idea should be delivered to the other side, that is the receiver. So all these 7 C's, if they come together, then definitely the communication process would be very, very effective, and all these 7 elements, they should be exercised by all the important elements of communication. And if that happens, then obviously the functions which are intended from the communication to be served, they would be definitely done. Further, since when we spoke about different kinds of communication, one of the last that we discussed was the mass media. It's very important aspect of communication, especially in the present context. Now, since this is one part of the lecture when it related to mass media, so to begin with, we can all talk about we can outline the development of journalism in India from a mission to an industry, and then this particular topic of mass media also would contain the explanations wherein its impact in the present scenario would be stated. Also, this particular half of the lecture would also deal with how much reach these different channels of mass medias have on people. That would mean the impact of radio, the impact of television, the impact of newspapers, magazines, the impact of internet on people. Also, when we talk about the internet, we would also look into the positive and negative impact of internet, which is very, very crucial to address. Now, if we talk about different types of mass media, the first is the journalism. It's a discipline of collecting, analyzing, verifying, and presenting information regarding the current events, trends, issues, and people. And as we all know, who practice journalism, they are known as journalists. Then broadcasting and telecasting. They are the distribution of audio and video signals to a number of recipients that belong to a large group. This group may be the public in general or a relatively large audience within the public. Thus, an internet channel may distribute various kind of text or music worldwide, while a public address system, for example, a workplace, may broadcast very limited and ad hoc sound bites to a small population within its range. The other kind of mass media is the internet. Internet, very simply, we call it as a net or a web, and it is actually a network of networks. Specifically, it is the worldwide publicly accessible network of interconnected computer networks that transmit data by packet switching using the standard internet, what we call as the IP, Internet Protocol. It consists of millions of smaller domestic, academic, business and governmental networks which together carry various information and services such as electronic mail, online chat, file transfer, and the intellect web pages and other documents of the World Wide Web. Then one other important stream of this particular topic is publishing. Publishing is the industry concerned with the production of literature or information, the activity of making information available for public view. In some cases, authors may be their own publishers. Traditionally, the term refers to the distribution of printed works such as the books and the newspapers. With the advent of digital information systems and the internet, the scope of publishing expanded to include the websites, the blogs, and the like. The last is the mobile. The mobile phones were introduced in Japan, but they became a mass media only in 1998 when the first downloadable ringing tones were introduced. Soon most forms of media content they were introduced on mobile phones. And now, as we all know, mobile phones have become worth millions of dollars, and they have lot of apps and applications on them, including the gamings and the various news and entertainments and advertising services that all of us can see. Now, there is more to go into the lecture, but in the present lecture, we wind up today as we discussed what is communication, what are essential elements, the functions, the process, and the 7 important C's of communication. And also, we opened up on the topic what essentially is mass media, the different kinds of mass media. And in the later lectures, we are going to go into details of it. So keep joining us for lectures on this particular topic. Thank you so much.
Do you wish to be part of a television studio like this, or any other media system, or already part of any media system, want to enhance a new set of skills? Welcome to School of Journalism and New Media Studies. Here in the School of Journalism and New Media Studies, we are offering program for all set of people to learn and enhance their media skills. The vision of School of Journalism and New Media Studies is to generate a new set of professionals in the area of media and communication studies with understanding about role of media in the national development and global understanding. We offer innovative programs in the field of journalism and mass communication that sets a benchmark of high quality learning and teaching process at the national level. We offer these programs across the country with the help of our regional network as well as study center. Same manner, many of our programs are offered through online mode with a sophisticated learning management system. SOGDS offers programs from PhD in journalism and mass communication till certificate level. We have
Hello and welcome to the session. In today's session, we will be discussing about the fractional knapsack problem, and we'll try to find a solution to this particular problem using greedy approach. But let us first define the fractional knapsack problem, the knapsack problem itself. And first we will define the knapsack problem with the help of words, and then we will define this particular problem with the help of some mathematical notation. So what is the knapsack problem? Well, for the knapsack problem, there are the things which are given are a knapsack or a bag. Knapsack is just a bag of some capacity, okay, and the capacity can be defined. One of the ways of defining the capacity is a weight limit of the bag. So suppose the bag can carry 10 kgs, 15 kgs, whatever. So that is the weight limit of that particular bag. And in addition to that, so we have a bag, and our objective is to pack in that particular bag a set of objects such that objects has we maximize the profit. That is our objective is. So we are given a set of objects, and each object will have a weight, and that object will have associated profit. Right. So what is exactly the problem or its objective? Fill the given knapsack, fill the bag with the object such that the sum of profit associated with the objects that are filled in the knapsack is maximum. So we are trying to maximize our profit, and we are filling only those objects which are maximizing our profit. But the constraint in that particular case happens to be the knapsack has a weight limit. So definitely this problem will be, the problem will be real problem when the total weight of the objects put together is more than the capacity of the bag. And that is where we need to make a decision, right? Now you can fill the objects fraction to knapsack, therefore the name fractional knapsack. So the problem which we will be discussing today, where we are allowing you to fill the bag with just fraction, like half of the weight has been filled up, half of an object has been filled up. So if object was of 10 kg, then only 5 kg has been put. So that is allowed in this particular case. And there is another knapsack problem, which is called 0-1 knapsack problem, where either you fill the whole object or nothing at all. But in both the cases, the objective of us is that we should be able to maximize the profit. And what we will be discussing today, we will be discussing the fractional knapsack problem. Now, if we look at this fractional knapsack problem, what kind of problem is, what exactly we are trying to do? Obviously, we are trying to do optimization. Why? Because we are finding the best optimal solution from the possible solution. So we are optimizing, like one of the solution which gives us the maximum profit, right? That is the real the solution to this particular problem. And the technique we would be following to solve this particular problem is greedy technique. Okay, so what greedy technique will do? What we will do, we'll try to select the best available option from the current problem. So once we have selected the best option, then we will move on to the next. Okay, so the best option has been selected. From the remaining, then we will be selecting the whatever is the best option, like that. So greedy approach, this is what is the greedy approach. And in greedy approach, once you have selected a particular option, you cannot return it. So you can go on to do next greedy step only. You cannot just return back to the original state. Okay, then and you find that the putting things together, if two things are put together, then that is turning out to be a better solution. That is not allowed. You pick up solutions one by one, right? And here also we will be picking up objects one by one. So that is the essence of greedy approach. So how we are going to solve the fractional knapsack problem with the help of greedy approach? But let us define the problem in a slightly mathematical terms. So given, what is given? A knapsack of capacity W. So W is defined. It can be kgs, grams, it does not matter, or it can be a quantity. But for the present time, let's keep or let's assume that we are talking about the weight of the object. Then a list of n objects, say O1 to On. So these are n objects. Their numbering or their naming is not that important, but each object has a weight, small w, okay, wi. So ith object has a weight wi, and a profit associated with that object is pi. So if I pack a particular this particular wi weight I into the knapsack, I'll be gaining pi profit because of that. And finally, since it's a fractional knapsack problem, so we are saying a fraction where xi is a member of set from 0 to 1, right? And in between we can say that there are many real number. It can be 0.1, 0.2 and so on till 1. So we can pack a fraction of object OI, right, in the knapsack. We can pack 0 also, or we can pack 1 also, but we can also pack the fraction. So that is why xi is a fraction. So we can place any object in fraction into the bag. And then profit of functional object. So if fractional objects happens to be pi and xi. So if I have packed, let's say, half of a particular object, then its profit will also become half, pi into xi. So that way, this is what it is. So profit of fractional object becomes pi into xi. And the problem objective is fill the knapsack up to its maximum capacity W such that the total profit earned is maximized. Now further, we can represent it as I said, an optimization problem, and the optimization problem in this particular case becomes that maximize, what we are maximizing? The profit, and the profit was pi into xi, the fractional profit of all the objects which we have filled up, summing it up from I is equal to 1 to n. Remember that some of the objects, the quantity will be 0, the fraction which we are packing may be 0, some of the object, the fraction we are packing may be 1, some of the object may have quantity or the fraction which we have packed is 0.1 or 0.2 or half, whatever it may be. However, this particular maximization problem, right, the optimization problem, is subject to a typical constraint. And the constraint is that the sum of all the fractional objects, right, sum of all the fractional objects should be less than or equals to W. Ideally, it should be equal to W. That's why we are allowed to have fractional object in this particular case. And as earlier, the value of the fraction xi, which happens to be fraction, can be 0 till 1. So any value between 0 to 1, where the value of, that is for all the objects. So this is representing from first object till nth object. So for any amount we can pack within the knapsack. So now the problem is very much there. Okay, now how to solve it with the help of greedy approach? Let's try to understand this with the help of an example. An example gives a lot of insights into it. Then we will follow it up with the algorithm, and finally we will try to find out what is the complexity of that particular algorithm. Well, the example of naps, we are just taking n equals to 3. So there are 3 objects, let's say, and capacity of the knapsack, let's assume, is 20, right? And the profit associated with these 3 objects, n equals to 3, profit of first object is 25, second object is 24, and profit of third object is 15. And the weights associated with the object are that first object is of the weight 18, second object is of weight 15, and the third object is of weight 10. Now the knapsack or the fractional knapsack problem is asking us what should we put in the bag, right, so that our profit is maximized. Now what can be the approaches for that? Right, so we would be using greedy approach, but even in greedy approach there can be 3 greedy approaches in this particular case. First, let's start with the maximum profit, right? Then the second approach, we start with the maximum weight. And the third approach, we will do some mathematical operation and try to find out. So the possible greedy strategies from the remaining, now what we are going to do? We are going to do this particular thing from the remaining objects only, right? So from the remaining objects, what we are going to select? The object that has the maximum profit that fits into the knapsack. So this is the first approach. So let's look into this approach. Okay. So what we have so we are selecting that object. We are filling the knapsack with that particular object which has the maximum profit. Maximum profit, if we see the slide, right, is written over here 25. So P1 is 25. That happens to be the highest profit, right? So the first object, okay, first object in this particular approach, let's select the entire object, okay, the entire first object. Now the first object's weight is 18. Why? Why we are selecting what? This is the approach we are following. So we are taking the maximum profit 1, right? And maximum profit belongs to P1 or object 1. Okay. And what is the weight of that particular object 1? It is 18 kg. So what we are left with? Only 2 kgs, right? So we are left with 2 kgs. Then the next best profit belongs to object 2. Right? And object 2 has a weight of 15. So we will be selecting only 2 kgs out of the 15, and third one will be nothing, right? Because that is how the problem solution is. We picked up 1, 2 by 15 for the second, and nothing for the third. So we have satisfied the constraint. The value of xi is between 0 and 1, all the cases. So this is the weight you can figure out. The weight is 18 plus 2 kg equals to 20. And what is the total profit in this particular case? The total profit is Pi into Xi. So Pi is 25 into 1, right? Because we have filled up the entire object. So 25 plus 2 by 15 into the profit is 24, because that is what we have filled up of the second object. So when we compute this particular thing, it turns out to be roughly 3.2, and what we get is a total profit of 28.2. What happens if we follow the second strategy? Now, second strategy is select the object that has the maximum weight that fits into the knapsack. So okay, that has the minimum weight, not maximum, I'm sorry, weight that fits into the knapsack. Now if we look into the weight, so we are starting with 10, 15 and 18. So it is other way around. So the third object, object 3, has the least weight. So we pick up that particular object, okay. So we have filled up 10 from X3 object. So weight 10 has been filled up. So what is the remaining weight? Is the 10 kg left, because we have filled up 10. The capacity was 20 kg. So only 10 kg is left. So 10 kg. Now the next lowest weight is 15. So 2/3 of 15 is 10. So we fill up the 2/3 of that particular object into the knapsack or the bag. And once we have filled these two up, then there is 0 capacity left for the third object. So once again, we compute the profit of the total weight for this. Obviously, it is going to be 20. That's how we have computed. What about the profit? We have not filled up anything of object which has a profit of 25. So that becomes 0. The 24 object we have taken 2 by 3rd of that object only. So it will be 2 by 3 plus 15 is the weight of, that is, we have completely taken this particular object, we have taken it as 1, so 15 into 1, so total weight becomes 31. So we can see the strategy 1 has not yielded or not got us the best results. So the greedy approach, if I'm selecting just that picking up just the profit, right? Just the profit and then selecting greedily the profit, it's not working. Though weight in this particular case is turning out to be better, but probably both of them may not be the right kind of strategies to solve the knapsack problem. In fact, the third strategy, select the object with maximum PI upon WI, which is basically the profit per unit weight. Now this strategy seems to be most logical greedy strategy, okay, that fits into the knapsack. So this is the strategy which we are going to utilize, and probably this strategy should give us the best result and solve the knapsack problem in that particular sense. So let's try to divide 25 and divide its related weight. So 25 by 18. Now you can see per kg it is giving just 1.39. Okay, whereas 24 by 15 is giving us 1.6 and 15 by 10 is giving us 1.5. So which is the best one in this particular case? Obviously is object 2, right? So as per this particular approach, which happens to be the best approach, let's pick up object 2, complete of that particular object 2. Once you pick up that complete object 2 is of 15 kg. So knapsack now is only left with, the knapsack has only 5 kg. And that 5 kg we pick up from the third object. So that is 1 by 2 of 10, which becomes 5. So this is the total weight. And what you get in this particular case, the profit, okay, once again, the first object has not been filled up at all, but the second object has been taken up completely. So it is 24 into 1, okay, plus 1 by 2, half, because we have taken only the half of the third object, and the profit of third object is 15. So it turns out to be, we get 7.5 here, and we get the best figure over here, 31.5 out of these 3 approaches. So the approach where we are dividing the per unit, right, we are taking profit per unit weight. That is the approach which is working as far as knapsack problem or solution to the knapsack problem is concerned. So once we understand this particular logic, the next thing which we need to know is how to solve this particular problem, how to write algorithm to this particular problem. Because first of all, whenever you get a problem, first try to identify how you are going to address it just on piece of paper. Once you are able to do that, the next best thing to do is to find the good algorithm to solve this particular algorithm. And we have selected the greedy approach. So there has to be this greedy approach. We have found out that PI divided by WI, right, taking the per unit, a profit per unit weight, may be a good approach to take a good approach as far as greediness is concerned, greedy approach, which is going to solve this particular problem. So let's write algorithm in that particular context. So what kind of algorithms which we will have for fractional knapsack greedy algorithm? So input, now when we are talking about input, we are talking about the weights. So weights we are taking W, and 1 to n, basically it's an array. So weight is an array of n integers representing object 1 to object n. Okay. Profits are also an array of n integers representing profit of first object number 1 to object number n, and assume profit and weights are sorted by PI divided by WI. So what we are assuming that our sequence is already a sorted sequence, but that sorted sequence actually takes maximum amount of time in knapsack when we try to find out the complexity of this particular algorithm. The next thing we know is capacity of the knapsack, which happens to be W. So these two are the input. Okay, and what output we are expecting? We are expecting an optimal solution which is giving us fractions in terms of x, right? x1 to n. So these basically are representing the fractions of different objects which are to be packed in the bag. Okay, now we have 4 steps which are written in just one line because they are initializations. And in the initialization process, what we are basically doing, we are running a for loop, okay, initializing all fractions, right, to zeros, the overall profit as 0, and which basically represents the total or overall profit, and overall weight which has been packed so far into the knapsack is also 0, because initially total profit is 0, weight are 0, and then greedily we will pack one object after another. Now next is we take the value of 1. Now, what is our assumption over here? Profits and weights are sorted by PI divided by WI, which is profit per unit weight. That means the best profit per unit weight, that particular object is object 1. Right. So, if that is object 1, that is the value of I, while weight is less than W, we have not packed anything. Then the next line is if weight plus WI is less than W. So if that happens to be true, okay, weight plus weight I, that means we have added the weight of the object to initial weight. Initial weight is 0, right? So if it is less than W, well, that means the object can be packed, right? So you completely pack that particular object, you assign Xi as 1. So x1 will become 1 and the weight now will become the weight, the initial weight is 0 plus the weight of the ith object, which is first object. So that will added over here. Else you will find out obviously this is less than W. So you will be, that means the overall weight of the object is more than the size or the size of the knapsack or the weight which is allowed in the knapsack. If that happens, then this particular lines allows you to pack only fractionally, as far as object fractionally into the knapsack. So over here the fraction would be computed where W minus the weight, whatever is the weight of this particular weight Xi, is this particular thing will be subtracted and divided by total weight, giving us how much fraction can be packed into that particular object. And then finally you compute the profit using the PI into Xi formula, and that is how you complete your algorithm, and this is how the fractional knapsack algorithm runs. Well, if we try to look at one of the example how this particular algorithm is running. So in this particular case, we are taking an example where objects numbering is, we are not using PI divided by WI in a sorted order, but just to demonstrate. So suppose this is the problem where weight is 2, 3, 5 like that and profits are associated profit, then we will compute PI by WI, and this is what is going to be computed first. Once this is computed, actually this particular data should be sorted, but we have not done it. Right, we have not done the sorting, otherwise you can do that particular sorting. So we start with first object. This is the maximum, right? The PI by WI is highest here. So this particular object will be packed completely. Why? Because the weight is only 1 and total weight which we can pack is 5. So now how much is to be packed? 4. Now for 4, what we find out, the next best is 5. What is the weight? 2. So we pack that, 4 minus 2, 2. So once again, the fraction which is to be packed is 1. That means the whole object, that is object 1, is to be packed. And the remaining now capacity, the third is in this particular list is 4.5. So here we have 4. Obviously, we will be packing the fraction because only 2 objects are left. So we will be packing 2 by 4, which happens to be just 2 of the object. So that's how the overall capacity will become 0, and total profit will be PI into Xi. It is 10 because it is 1 into 10, 6 into 1, and because this is 18 and we have packed 2 by 4, so we get 9, and total profit we get is 25. So that is the way the algorithm will work out the solution, right? So with this, I come to almost the concluding part. But what we have discussed in this particular session, we have talked about the fractional knapsack problem. The greedy algorithm is used to solve the fractional knapsack problem, where we have used the PI divided by Xi, that is profit per unit weight, as our basic defining criteria. The maximum value of that is, the object with maximum PI by Xi is selected to be picked up, and a fraction in the last. And the complexity of this algorithm technically is order n log n, which actually belongs to the sorting of the values of this whatever is needed as far as this algorithm is concerned. So with this, I end this particular session. Thank you for being with me.
Do you know that the world's population has reached 8 billion on 15th November 2022? And we are still counting. I don't know where do we go from here. The predictions are scary. Any idea how many people can Mother Earth sustain? India's growing population is a serious concern, and we are soon going to become the world's most populous country. Wow, number one. Population is, after all, a human issue. The UN proposed Sustainable Development Goals cannot be achieved unless and until we consider the population dynamics. So, here we are. Indira Gandhi National Open University offers appreciation course on population and sustainable development. The course explores the linkages between population and sustainable development. In this course, there are diverse issues related to population, environmental safety, livelihoods, human health, migration, urbanization, and much more. The course duration is 3 months, but of course, you can complete it within a year. The eligibility of the course is graduation from a recognized university. So, if you are a development professional, working in a government sector, researcher, or keen to know more about the population and sustainable development, the course is must for you. Hurry up and join this course so that we are able to convert population
Hello learners, welcome to this session. This is the 9th session in the series of MCS 221 Data Warehousing and Data Mining. In today's session, we will discuss ETL tools and ELT in data warehousing. So let us see the agenda for today's discussion. We will start with ETL process just for a recap, and then ETL past and present, ETL pipelines, and what are the factors to be considered whenever we try to build the ETL pipelines, types of ETL, and then we will see the difference of ETL versus ELT. So this particular session is just a cue of the earlier session. In the earlier session, we had discussed about the ETL, all the 3 steps, that is extract, transform, and load of data into the data warehousing. So that particular ETL, we had seen it as a very important component in the overall data warehousing design. So business applications use this particular OLT systems, those are the database management systems, wherein which the primary focus will be on the transaction processing part. They may be reading the data, then writing the data, or else modifying the data. So there will be a kind of focus only primarily to the transaction processing when it comes to the OLTP systems. So they are not efficient at analyzing the things. So you may modify the data, you may read the data, write the data, or else alternate the tables, structures, etc. But when it comes to the OLAP, which is very much nearer to the data warehousing, whenever we talk about the data warehousing, it is a OLAP kind of thing. So these particular OLAPs are very much focused upon the analytical processing. Here, it don't directly focus on to the transaction part. However, whatever the data that is being stored in various source systems, those particular data is being pulled into and then transformed by the ELT process or ETL process and then loaded into the data warehouses. So OLAP are excellent in analyzing, like reading and analyzing. Hence, ETL is very much necessary to transform the OLTP information, like the database management system information, into the work with the OLAP, that is the data warehouse. So we had understood the ETL, the importance of the ETL there whenever we are converting the OLTP into the OLAP databases. So during this particular ETL process, information is completely extracted from various relational and non-relational, maybe from MongoDB or maybe from other resources. The extraction part will be pulling into the data, and then there will be a finite component wherein which the transformation, we call that particular area as the staging area. It will be converting the whole data into a readable format, understandable format, integrated format, and then it will be loaded. The whole thing will be loaded into the OLAP data warehouse. So this is how the ETL process that we had seen in the earlier section. And then in this particular past, whatever the data warehouse engineers, what they had done is they had completely hand-coded the ETL process. So in the data staging area, we had seen several kinds of transformations taking upon the data. That too, those arrived from the various source systems. So here, the ETL is not a simple logic, because it has to pull in the structured data, non-structured data, semi-structured data, and it has to convert it into a meaningful format before loading it into the OLAP data warehouse. However, earlier data warehouse engineers, what they had done is they used to code the whole ETL process, how to retrieve the data from the source systems, and then how to do the noise reduction in the data, or else how to convert the whole dirty data into the cleansed data. So those particular processes are done manually, that too hard coded using R, Python, SQL, whatnot. There are several languages which supports this kind of coding, and they used to do. However, when it comes to the modern ETL solutions like Xplenty, so this particular Xplenty will allow the data teams to skip hand coding kind of thing, but it automatically integrate the most popular data sources into their data warehouse. However, it will be having a kind of, for the first time, it will be having a kind of manual intervention wherein which the engineers needs to understand the whole system, the sources system, and then they have to apply this Xplenty kind of system, and then they'll be automizing the complete ETL process. So this particular ETL process, there is a term associated with the ETL process called as ETL pipeline. Here we can see on the slide, there is a simple ETL example given, pipeline example given over here. Here, a customer orders, that too in the SAP systems are existing, and that is the primary source of the data, and then there is a pipeline drawn to the data warehouse, wherein which you can see in between there is the ETL process, and then the customer orders are the primary sources, and then from that particular thing there is a line drawn, or else you can call that is a path, or else a channel kind of thing, which is laid from the source to the destination. Here, the source is the customer order existing, the data existing in the SAP system, and the destination is the data warehouse, that is the OLAP data warehouse. So here, ETL is the in-between component wherein which it is transforming the whole data into a workable data or integrated data and is pulled into the data warehouse. So each of these particular end-to-end process is called as a pipeline, right from the source system till the destination system. You can see a kind of pipeline is being laid over. So it is common for companies to have dozens and hundreds of ETL pipelines. So for each and every source system, there may be a special need wherein which they have to lay down a kind of pipeline kind of thing. They have to plan a pipeline of kind of thing wherein which they have to identify the source and they have to identify the destination, and then there will be the ETL process included and the pipeline is being finalized. So these pipelines are created and maintained by data engineering team, or else you can call them as the ETL engineers. So whenever there comes a kind of a new business need, once again the engineers will think of how to what exactly is the source system and what exactly is the destination system, and how to integrate from various sources in order to make it available for the analytical reasons in the data warehouse. So for example, here the new need, the business need may be the combination of data from orders and the results of a recent advertising company. So the data you can see here, it is coming from the orders as well as after some advertisement campaign, how many, what is the increase in the order. So that particular thing also needs to be analyzed. So whenever there is a kind of new business need, there may be a possibility of drawing a new pipeline from the source to the destinations. And let us see, there are certain factors which needs to be considered for building the ETL pipelines. The ETL pipelines most probably may be automized or else may be hard-coded, whatever the reason may be. There are certain criteria which needs to be thought for before laying down the ETL pipelines. So the first thing is the changes to source data. So there may be a change in the data structure or the schema. So these particular changes needs to be addressed. So from time to time, the schema of a data source may be changing and this needs to be addressed. How will the pipeline handle this particular change? So once the structure of the data table in the source may be changing, or else the schema might have been changed in the source data. So obviously how to take care of that particular thing in the ETL component, that is the first thing that one needs to, that is the first factor one needs to think of. And then the transformation dependencies. So pipelines typically involve multiple steps. It is not a single step. You can see you have to identify the source or sources, and then you have to see how the data is being pulled into, and then what kind of noises needs to be reduced into the ETL. So there are several steps included into the ETL stage. So this particular pipelines typically involves multiple steps and each step dependent on the outcome of the previous step. So for example, here the determining the closest data warehouse to the customer first depends on the geolocation, whether the geolocation of the customer is being properly identified or not. So everything is a kind of dependent factor over there about the geolocation. In order to identify the closest warehouse for the customer, you have to have first of all the geolocation components or else coordinates available with you. When a step fails or produces an unexpected output, how will dependent steps handle this behavior? So that is how we have to take care whenever the transformation dependency factor is being considered. Next comes the change in the priorities. So it is common for the pipelines to evolve over time, and as one step in a pipeline changes, so we told that there are multiple steps involved. So one step, if at all there is a change in one step, how it will impact the other steps. That also needs to be analyzed into the other downstream steps, and then you have to address all those particular things. Once the first step itself is being changed, obviously it may or may not impact the other steps. You have to look into the changes into the pipelines. For example, a pipeline is enhanced to pull data from a third-party source that provides traffic data. So how will this addition of this new data affect downstream processing? So this particular thing is a new thing, and then upon the change, how this particular thing will be changed across, like changed in the downstream pipeline. So those needs to be addressed. And the fourth one is error handling. Sometimes while the ETL process, or else while pulling the data and then sending it to the ETL is happening, there may be a breakage in the pipeline, just like a kind of issue, corrupted data or else network failure may be there. So how to handle those particular failures, the error handling failures, and then those needs to be addressed whenever we think of the ETL process. Then comes the performance tuning. Sometimes we may be thinking of having several sources and then the ETL is been there and then converting the data or treating the data, cleansing the data. However, there may be some certain performance issues also. So as the data size grows and as processing steps increase, the total time to process a pipeline can become problematic. So we have to reduce whether the same pipeline can be reduced into two or else can be queued upon one after the other. Likewise, you have to think and then you have to performance, just like we do it in the database management tuning. Likewise, performance tuning of all these incoming data needs to be taken care. For example, here we had quoted when processing a pipeline takes so long that it cannot complete before the next update is scheduled to begin. What is the process for measuring and tuning performance of the ETL process and its pipelines? That particular thing needs to be addressed whenever the things are being delayed. Then comes the issue of the scalability. So here we have to address whenever the data increases, like ETL processing needs to scale in a range of ways. Today the data may be of 600 GB. Tomorrow it may be changing it in a month's time, it may be changing to several TBs also. So how to address these kinds of things whenever the data is highly scaling? So whether to have certain servers in place, in-house servers only, or else whether we have to opt it to the clouds or other kinds of things. So these particular things include the input data size, processing steps, third-party service invocations, and parallelized data loads. So how will this scalability requirements be addressed by the ETL process as the needs evolve? So that is also a common factor that needs to be addressed before selecting the ETL. So when we talk about these particular steps, there are several ETLs, several types of ETLs or several types of ETL tools. So in the previous prior slides, we had seen that earlier it was hard coded and later on everything got automated with respect to the ETL processes. So here there are several tools available. Some of the tools are in the range of enterprise software ETL, and second category is open source ETL, third category is custom ETL, and the fourth category is ETL cloud services. This particular enterprise software ETL is nothing but it is a kind of proprietary version. So several software companies are coming up with a kind of products called as ETL products, and they wish to sell and support commercial ETL software products. So these kinds of things are a kind of ready-made kind of packages, that too coming with the proprietary thing, licensing and everything are applicable to this. So they are most matured in adoption and functionality. So most of these products provide the graphical user interface. So that is the best thing that, so you have to, using that particular graphical user interface, what needs to be selected is you have to select the inputs and you have to select what kind of treatment is required. And you have to select what is the destination data warehouse or else the OLAP data warehouse. So these are the things which can be configured using the graphical user interface for designing and executing the ETL pipelines. And these particular things support relational databases, non-relational databases like JSON, XML, and other kinds of things. Also, some of them support for event streaming sources such as Apache Kafka and other kinds of things. You can see there are several examples we can quote here when it comes to the proprietary versions, or else you can call them as the enterprise ETL software. One is Informatica Power Center, IBM InfoSphere Data Stage, Oracle Data Integrator, or else you can call it as the ODI. And then from Microsoft, there is one product called as Microsoft SQL Server Integration Services, SSIS, and then AB Initio. From SAP, there is one product called as SAP Data Services, and from SAS, there is one product called as SAS Data Manager. So these are some of the products which can be counted as enterprise ETL software. There are other next kind of category called as the open source ETL. So in this particular open source software, there are certain products which are coming from past 1 decade. So developers are continuously developing these kinds of open source ETL tools. So these tools are completely free to use. One can download and put it onto the server, and then they can use directly without having the licensing and other kinds of issues. So the best benefit we are getting from here is the source code is freely available. So what we do with the source code? It is nothing but we can do tailor-make changes, we can extend the things, we can enhance the things, we can enhance the capabilities, or else we ourselves can code certain things in order to make certain tailor-make changes according to the needs of the organization. So that is the advantage that we are getting from the open source ETL. So these tools vary significantly in the quality, and then you have to, the engineers, whoever are handling the ETL or else the data team, whichever is handling the data warehouses, they should have minimum knowledge in the programming that is being done in the open source ETL, so that they can make the tailor-make changes for their company. So unlike the ETL tools, those are coming from the proprietary, these are, some of the tools are having the graphical user interface feature, and then design in order to design and execute the pipelines. Some of the examples we had quoted over here, one is the Talent Open Studio. This is purely a ETL open source software, and then Pentaho Data Integration, PDA, Hadoop for big data and other kinds of things. So these are the three examples that we can quote for the open source ETL software. And then there is the third one called as the custom ETL. So many companies, what they will do is, if at all they don't have the persons, the engineers or as the software engineers who can handle the hard coding kind of thing for their ETLs, they will give it as the project to the software companies and they pay for it. So many companies use general purpose programming languages in order to create their own ETL tools on behalf of the company. So this approach has the greatest flexibility. However, this requires users to perform their own maintenance. That is the hardest thing that one has to do. From the company side, they have to look after the maintenance part. They have to build up their own documentation, testing, and perform ongoing development. Here, the possibility is in the dual way. One is that they can put the requirements and give it to a company, or else if at all the team exists within the organization itself, they can train the engineers in order to develop the custom ETL. The difficult part here is the maintenance part, the documentation part, the testing part, and the performance ongoing part. Suppose if the software engineers whoever are designed, developed, and then configured this particular custom ETL into the company, and if at all they left, so most probably the next team needs to be taken over and they have to look into the maintenance and other kinds of aspects. Here we can give certain examples of languages like SQL, Python, Java, Spark, and Hadoop for the big data kind of thing. So these are certain examples for the programming languages which they can use. The limitation here is the downside is that you will need lots of custom coding, setup, and man hours getting the ETL operational. So the team should work just like so many man hours in order to get into the final kind of outcome and pulled it into the data warehouse. Then the fourth type of ETL is the cloud services. So Amazon is one company which is providing the AWS kind of thing, Amazon Web Services kind of cloud services. Google is one platform, and then Microsoft is one platform with the Azure. They are providing the cloud services. Here, all these three companies are having the ETL capabilities, built-in ETL capabilities. Like earlier we had seen IaaS, like infrastructure as a service, software as a service, platform as a service. Likewise, ETL as a service is also one kind of possibility which they are offering from the cloud partners. So if your data is already in one of these particular three clouds, it would be very much beneficial. So no need of going and hiring another ETL, or else no need of putting another kind of ETL. However, they themselves are providing a kind of ETL facilities which can be used. There are several advantages whenever you incorporate with the same, and as well as there are certain disadvantages also, wherein which once you take the ETL and once the data, all the data is put into their this one, a binded kind of thing is happening, and then we can't come out of that particular binding kind of thing. So these particular solutions are highly proprietary. Why? Because they are being binded over The data is also lying, the organization's data is lying on the cloud, as well as we had hired the ETL component as a service. So we are being totally bound, and then as they are proprietary, we have to pay for it. The licensing plays a major role, and then work within that particular framework only. Once you want to withdraw the services from that cloud and we want to shift it to the other cloud, once again it will be greater, and it will be totally a difficult task. For example, here AWS Elastic MapReduce, that is EMR, that is one of the cloud ETL tool. AWS Glue is from the Amazon Web Services. Once again, Amazon Web Services data pipeline is another tool that is available. From Microsoft, there is Azure Data Factory. From Google, there is Cloud Data Flow, Segment, and Stitch. So these are some of the examples of the cloud providers with respect to the ETL tools. Then there is another terminology called as ELT, which is becoming very much popular nowadays. That is called as, here you can see the L and T are reversed. So earlier we called the process as the ELT, and here we are calling the process as the ETL, and here we are calling the process as the extract, load, and then transform. So there is not much difference. However, as the two components has swapped, so first comes the loading part and then comes the transforming part. So extract, load, transform is the process of extracting the data from one or multiple sources and then loading it into the target data warehouse. In that particular target data warehouse, all these transformation kinds of things will be happening. Mostly this ELT is being used for the cloud data warehouses. So most probably the traditional kind of data warehouses, they are not into this ELT kind of thing. However, this cloud data warehouses are into the ELT kind of, they are using the ELT kind of technique. Then the steps here included are, first thing, there is no change. The first step is the extract step, where in which this works similarly in both the ELT and ETL. This is nothing but you have to extract the data from, it has to extract the data from the various sources, maybe like structured data sources, semi-structured, or else unstructured data sources. Then comes the load part. The ELT differs here within the ETL. Rather than deliver this particular mass of raw data and load it into the interim processing, what it does is it completely shortens the cycle between the extraction and delivery. It directly loads the data into the data warehouse, and later on, if at all the transformations are required, the transformations will be done within the data warehousing only. Then comes the transform, I told you. So this offers more opportunities to mine it for relevant business intelligence in near real time. So here what we can expect is the data may be of very much ready in nature and is being extracted and is being transferred into the data warehouse, or else you can call it as the loaded into the data warehouse, and that minimum transformation is happening over there. So here the real-time analytics are possible for these particular data warehouse, these particular things. So here, suppose if the data warehousing is supporting the real-time kind of analytics, this particular ELT is the possible solution for it. So this is the ELT process. Database, these are the sources, and then there is extract and directly loaded, and then here within the data warehouse itself, the data warehouse transformation is happening, and then real-time analysis or analytics is possible. What are the benefits? It gives better results with more efficient effort. Time is very less. It takes much less time when compared to the ETL. It transforms your data transfer, combine data from various sources and formats, manage data at scale. It primarily saves the time and money. So you can see here, this is the left-hand side shown is the ELT process, and the right-hand side is the ETL process. And here in the ELT process, you can see extract, transform, and then the load. And you can call this particular central area called as the data staging area. And here you can see directly only you can see two processes happening. Extraction is one process, and then the loading and transformation is clubbed together into the second process. So when the comparison comes into picture, the load time, obviously it takes significantly longer to get data from source systems when it comes to the ETL, and it takes very less time for the ELT. transformation time, as much of the data is in the form of usable data. So in the ELT, it reduces the time and immediately you can take the analytics from it. Complexity, as you can see, ETL tools typically have an ease to use GUI, but ELT requires in-depth knowledge of BI tools, masses of raw data, and a database that can transform it effectively. So data warehouse support, ETL is better fit for legacy kinds of systems, but ELT is better suitable for the cloud kind of platforms. Maintenance, ETL requires significant maintenance for updating the data, but ELT data is always available in nearly real time. So in this particular session, we had seen the ETL, the process, the steps, and then we had seen the ETL pipelines. And then later on, we had focused on what are the factors that contribute that one has to think upon whenever we go for the ETL, like changes and other kinds of things. And later on, we had shifted our focus towards the types of ETLs available in the market, ETL tools available in the market. Towards the end, what we had seen is we had introduced a new concept called as the ELT concepts, which is just similar to the ETL. However, there is a simple change and a kind of swap in load and transform. And towards finally, we had seen the differences between the ETL and the ELT. Hope you had understood this particular session, and more you can read it from MCS 221, that is data warehousing and data mining unit 4, and second, like towards the end, you have this particular chapter, whatever that has been covered in the session. Thanks for patient listening.